Welcome to the video. In this video, we're going to talk about the pitfalls of Avalara implementation, what you need to know, whether you're already in the process of implementation or you're thinking about implementing Avalara, whether you're considering getting started with Avalara or you're already an existing Avalara user. There may be some aspect of it that you haven't yet implemented and you're looking for some guidance on that. And today I'm going to explain to you what the steps are to give you a broad overview so you have an understanding, a better picture of the whole picture. Because sometimes it's really hard to know where you are when you're in a forest, but when you can zoom out and see the tree line from afar, you can be able to make better decisions and strategize a little bit better. So there are also some serious pitfalls if you do make a mistake with Avalara's implementation that could lead to a lot of issues with state audits, penalties, interest, things like that. And so you want to avoid these problems, accounting errors, things that are going to cost a lot of time for you to go back and fix, and also end up having penalties for that as well. So Avalara is, they've been around for a long time now, since 2004, and they're the number one competitor for Vertex. And so they are the king in e-commerce platforms right now, and also some mega corporations are working with them as well, especially corporations that have a lot of business online. And so you could be a small Shopify store, or you could be a major mega corporation, and you could be using Avalara in the same way. So today I'm going to show you the implementation steps and what to look out for as you go on. So let's get into it. So the first thing you need to know before you get started, before you get started with this, you can't implement something that you don't need or have a reason to implement. You need to understand that what you're trying to implement is a tax policy. You're trying to create something, a system that executes on an existing sort of policy. You've already created this policy. You might have it in writing, you might have it in your head, but the idea of this software is it's not going to create a policy for you. It's designed to execute, it's designed to manage that policy and to facilitate that policy. So you need to already have a tax policy in place. If you don't already have one, you need to speak to an expert on that, such as a CPA attorney, someone who's really got a lot of experience in that. The second thing you need to understand is, before you get started, is you need to know who on your team is going to be doing what. There are different aspects to this. There are, there's the accounting aspect of it. There's the technology side of it, right? You might have a financial controller or an accountant or someone in your finance team handling the finance part of it. Then you might have an IT person handling the technology aspect of it. So you need to have an understanding of who's going to do what, or are you going to take this all on yourself? Are you a solopreneur and you need to be able to do this yourself, or do you have an implementation partner, or do you have a consultant that you can rely on for these things? And even with consultants, there's still some aspects that you might need to delegate with yourself and your team, because the consultants can't access every part of your world. They still need access to certain things that only you have access to, questions that only you can answer. And so you do need to know who's going to do what, who's responsible for what. It's really important to kind of map that out beforehand, or you're going to be scrambling and you're going to have a hard time throughout the process if you don't think about that already. Now, there's the next part of it, was the implementation path. What is an implementation path? So what are you going to do first? What are you going to do second? What are you going to do third? Are you going to implement? Are you going to first get the policy in place, or are you going to set up the technology first? You need to know what your implementation path is going to be, and it'll become clear to you as you kind of go through the basics to what the path is going to be. If you have a consultant, they can lay out a roadmap for you, and they can be able to set up timelines and these kinds of things for you. If you don't have experience with that, it might be good to talk to a consultant and understand what kind of path you're going to end up taking and how long it's going to take. The ideal situation is, when it's all said and done, what's supposed to happen, right? I know Avalara advertises their software as like Automagic, right? You can lay down in a hot tub and, they've got the commercial where the people are in the hot tub in the office and they're all just like hanging out. But, I work with a lot of clients. I've talked to thousands of Avalara clients, and the ideal situation is it possible to get it to that point where you're literally completely hands off? Yes, but you still need resources. You still need people paying attention to the systems. So maybe it's not you, maybe it's a partner, a consultant who's overseeing the solution for you and maintaining it, but you still have to have eyes on it. It is not completely automagic. Hate to break it to you, but it's just not. You do need people, whether it's yourself or other people, to manage the system. And finally, account maintenance. I've already kind of talked about that. The system is not completely set it and forget it. You need to have people in place to manage and maintain it. Things change often. I mean, like so often, you'll get letters from different states letting you know, hey, you've got to change this form or that form. Avalara doesn't know when a state reaches out to you to let you know that they've changed your filing frequency. They don't know certain things because they're not in contact with the state. The state's contact with you. It's your job to then inform either your consultant or your employees or yourself to go in and to update your account and to manage the different aspects of it. Check your monthly filings, make sure things are going right, make sure things are being calculated properly. It's really important. As you know, now let's talk about tax policy. So you need to start with this. I told you already, if you don't have a tax policy, there's nothing for you to implement, right? So people get Avalara because of the Wayfair Supreme Court ruling, and being that we're now sort of a world where you can pretty much sell anywhere to anyone, you're pretty much taxed everywhere, right? So you're going to need to understand what your physical nexus is, what your economic nexus is, what your pre-existing registrations, where you have already pre-existing nexus, whether you have new nexus. If you're going to be creating new nexus, you need to plan for that, and you need to manage any old risks that might be hanging around. Statutes of limitations can go, more than 7 years. And so you have to be able to plan for any sort of risk and manage that accordingly. So number one is you need to have a tax policy in place. If you don't already have one, you can't go beyond this. You can't do anything until you have a tax policy in place. So implementing Avalara is very much reliant on the fact that you understand Nexus. Now, after you do that, you can then move on to implementing it in your technology. You might have a Shopify store. You might be using Quickbooks online or desktop. You might be a larger company using NetSuite or Oracle Kinetic. Avalara supports almost 1,000 integrations from Salesforce, CPQ, Microsoft, Dynamics, Business Central, SAP, B1, Acumatica, Odoo. All the major ERPs out there are compatible with Avalara's connector system, which is basically a fancy way of calling it an API. Now, they do build the APIs, and so they make it fairly easy to integrate, but there's work you have to do on both sides. You do have to map your products. You do have to understand that you have to map your clients, your customers over to Avalara as well. So kind of a two-sided implementation is that you have to set it up on both sides, both on your technology side, whether it's your ERP or your shopping cart, and on the Avalara side, where your products and your customers need to be mapped over so that the two systems can talk to each other seamlessly and be able to do calculations of tax in real time. And so you are getting all the accurate calculations on all of your invoices, and you're not charging tax where you don't need to be charging tax to customers you don't need to be charging tax to. So it's really important to understand, and all the technologies are going to have vastly different implementation procedures, and so you need to be aware of what technology are you going to implement and sort of have an understanding, a general understanding of what the architecture of that's going to look like. What system is going to be talking to what. You don't want to have overlap or double calculations. And so one of the major pitfalls that I see is that when clients have multiple systems, like for example, they have a Shopify store and they have a NetSuite or Quickbooks. And so they end up charging tax on the Shopify shopping cart, and then they send that transaction to Avalara, where then it's then charging tax again. So they're double dipping on tax, and it's because they have a redundancy in the system. It's one of the major pitfalls I see. You have to be careful with that, and so just watch out. That's as I said, this is about the pitfalls and sort of what you need to be aware of before you implement. And so that's one of the major ones. Tax returns. Now, one of the main reasons why a lot of clients go to Avalara is because they don't want to do hundreds of tax returns every year, sometimes thousands for bigger companies. I've seen companies having a couple thousand tax returns that they have to do every year. They do hundreds every month, and hopefully that's not you. Maybe you only do one or two or a dozen or so tax returns, but you do need to, every tax return is going to be actually very vastly different. You have, every state besides, there's certain conglomerate states that have uniform forms, but for the most part, they don't. And so every single state, you're going to have a different registration form. You're going to have a different account portal login, different form type that you have to fill out, different filing frequencies, different requirements at the jurisdiction level. Like in Colorado, I don't know how many hundreds of jurisdictions they have in Colorado. So you got to be really careful with that and pre-plan these things, because it's going to be very time consuming, arduous, and very, very complex. If you don't have a plan, if you're just going into it blindly, it's going to be really, really hard. So either you want to be involved in the planning process or involved in yourself, but perhaps you may even want to involve an accountant or a consultant to help you through this part of it as well. The implementation for Avalara is, as you can see, not that quick and easy. I've seen people take, on average, 6 to 9 months to implement this process when they do it themselves. It could be quicker if you have a strategic partner who can really, who knows the process inside and out and can help you get through this. You also have to deal with managing exempt customers. So if you have a wholesale business, you really need to know how to understand where you have to deal with exempt customers. If you have Nexus in a certain state and you have wholesale in that state, you have to get exemption certificates from those customers. You also need to understand product taxability. So sometimes you don't have to collect exemption certificates, but how do you map your products such that if a customer is buying it from you, that that product is exempt from tax? You need to make sure you map your products correctly. As I mentioned earlier, product mapping is very, very important, or else you're going to be charging tax where you don't need to be charging tax, or you might be under collecting tax where you need to be collecting a special tax. Customer exemption types, right? You have resellers, you have governments, you have nonprofits. Each of those kinds of customers has a different kind of certificate. You need to know what it looks like so that when they send it to you, you're not getting a gun license or a birth certificate or some random, I've seen people fill out napkins, write a napkin, scan it in and send it to you on a napkin. Literally, I've seen that before, and you have to be careful not to accept any old certificate. You have to make sure you're getting the legitimate certificate from the customer. And that's actually the first thing that an auditor is going to look at when they, if and when they do approach you. Oftentimes, state audits are not done by the state themselves. They're done by a contractor, a third party. They'll come in and they have a process. And one of the first things they're going to do is, hey, you have exemptions. Here we see you've got exempt sales. Show us your exemption certificates. It's the first thing they go for. It's low-hanging fruit for them. So if you don't do that properly, you're in for some pain. So there's also, you need to understand that if you make a mistake with any of this, you're going to be subject to penalties and interest for around 25%. And I don't know if they cap it in some states, but 25% of your what would have been taxable, plus the tax itself. So if you didn't charge tax where you should have been charging tax, you're now responsible for that. So, sales tax is really, it's I think it's worse than income tax, right? It's more costly if you're not careful. You need to be collecting it properly from your customers so that you're not liable and you don't cause yourself a problem down the road where you've got all this penalty interest accumulating for years and years and years. And then you end up with back tax and you have to deal with, all of this, the state audit, which is a time suck and an energy suck, and nobody wants to deal with that kind of stuff. So that's it for this presentation. These are the pitfalls of Avalara implementation, what you need to know. I've given you sort of the grand overview of the things that are really important as a recap. You need to have a tax policy. You need to know who's going to be delegated to, what your implementation path is going to be. You need to know what your technology setup is going to look like. You need to understand how you're going to be doing your tax returns, how you're going to be handling your exempt customers, and how to avoid the dangers of a state audit. Thank you for your attention to this video. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments.